Welcome back to the CSEC 1500 class. We are going to continue on with physical security, which is funny because physical security itself is one of those areas where I don't hear a lot of people say, I want to be a physical security analyst. And what I've been finding more and more about is any location where they're building a lot of data centers or there's an IT boom, they're looking for these physical security analysts and they're having a hard time finding them. So think about it. There might be a time where you want to become a specialist here. This is one of those areas that is in high demand and there's not a ton of people in it. So let's go into physical security controls. So before we get into the actual, what I like to call physical security, let's talk about the application side of physical security. We still need to have authentication and authorization and accounting within our systems. So we need to make sure that when we're talking about physical security, that we do the same thing. For instance, who do we allow through our gates? Who do we allow through our doors? Are we sure they are who they say they are? Or are we just allowing them through the barrier? Are we then figuring out their authorization and making sure that that authorization, that authentication will only authorize them to get to certain locations within our facility? We don't need every employee to be able to get into the server room, but maybe we need certain employees to be able to get in there and others to be blocked. Just like facilities, we don't want everyone who can everyone to get into the power distribution panels, because what if somebody goes in there and just flips all the switches? And then of course we still need to keep our accounting. We need a record of who came in, when, and who left, when, and if there are any security breaches, is there a record of those security breaches? Because physical security is the protection of hardware, software, networks, and data from physical actions or events that can cause damage and unauthorized access. Now, we focus on modern security and digital threats all the time, right? We talk about firewalls and we talk about IDSs, but physical security definitely is the starting point here. We need to make sure that we safeguard the facilities, the devices, and even the personnel to make sure that physical threats such as theft, vandalism, natural disasters, and even unauthorized access just do not occur. So let's talk about fence layout. Let's talk about site layout. Site layout is the first stage of when you're dealing with physical security. And what you're going to do is you're going to take a step back and you're going to decide, okay, where's my site? Where's all the entry and exit points? Do I need to put fencing in? And are there some areas that I need to add lighting in? Before I do anything, these are the sections that we probably should focus on. We need to make sure that we have the places that we can control the flow of traffic. We have places to put signage. We have ways to put bollards down in front of our buildings, which we'll talk about that when we talk about fencing. And then make sure that the lighting is applicable, because if it's too dark, our cameras won't even work so well, okay? So fencing and bollards are definitely something that you'll see everywhere. You probably noticed them, you just didn't know exactly why they're there. But in fencing, we always put in the physical barriers to prevent authorized individuals from entering restricted area. You'll notice that the height and material all depends on the level of security. So if we're dealing with fencing within like an environment, the most popular fencing is going to be chain link fencing. We're going to find this as a cost-effective area. Chain link provides visibility. We can still see through it, but deters people from entering our facility. You'll notice that if we want to go a step further with this, what we'll like to do is we'll add barbed wire or razor wire to the top of the fence, which will help increase the difficulty for breaching the perimeter. We're allowed to also use electric fencing, and electrical fencing can bring a shock or an alarm triggered to the fence. Not all electrical fences are going to give you a shock. A lot of electrical fences that I've used in the past are just sensor-based fencing, where the moment somebody touches the fence, you get an alarm alarm saying that this area has somebody trying to climb the fence. And then finally, you can also do solid fencing, where you want to keep people from seeing inside. Now, most of these solid fencings are normally built by more permanent structures, whether or not they're concrete or steel, but they definitely are there. Bollards, I can say the word, bollards are what you see like in this picture. It's these yellow concrete posts. They're short, sturdy posts designed to prevent vehicles from entering authorized areas or colliding with buildings. You normally see them around parking lots. You see them around entry points. You'll start noticing them everywhere. Even Walmart or Target or any of these places, they all have these out front to prevent people from driving right into the store. So you got to make sure that these are there to block or control vehicle access and to help with pedestrian zones. Definitely used all the time. Now, most of the ones we see around are going to be fixed, but there are such things as retractable ones that will rise and lower depending on what they're needed. You see some of these around private lots or during bigger cities, like where you rent a car or anything like that, to prevent vehicles from leaving the lot without authorization. You also have impact resilient ones that are designed to withstand high speed impacts as well, because they're looking for people that are going to be deliberately ramming their vehicle into something or into a crowded public area. This just helps prevent. So this is something that you need to know exists, because guess what? They tested on the SecurityPlus. Our next section is going to be our attacking with brute force. Now, brute force can come in many different forms, but one of the things that we want to talk about when it comes to physical brute force is exactly that. Brute force could be they just try to drive a vehicle into our property. It could be that they stole somebody's RFID badge and they're trying to enter the property, or they've cloned it and they're trying to enter the property. Brute force is any type of method that allows unauthorized access. It could be to physical, it could be to accounts, it could be anything. Now, brute force in general, you hear it a lot when it comes to passwords, and these are the different passwords, brute force attacks that you'll find with it. Brute force could be just a simple where they try different combinations of passwords. They might go through dictionary attacks. They might go through credential stuffing where they already know the username and password from a different account they may use and try to let it use it again. There's a whole bunch of different ways of using brute force passwords. Continuing on with our physical aspect, we can go on to surveillance systems. So surveillance systems themselves are essential for making sure that we help monitor and protect facilities and assets and even people from threats. And so these systems use cameras or sensors or other technologies to deter unauthorized threats. So you'll see these things come in different forms and fashions. They could be robot sentries are starting to get more popular. You'll start seeing drones flying around. You'll see object detection. A lot of times it says motion detection or motion recognition now with AI. You have a lot of cameras. A lot of places just do CCTV and video cameras, but you'll see surveillance systems as they go around. Now, the big thing on here is there's a ton of types of cameras, right? You've got fixed cameras, you got pan and tilt cameras, you got dome cameras. There's a lot of different types of cameras and a lot of different surveillance that we need to make sure. Surveillance also could be security guards, so make sure that you think of anything that is actively monitoring something could be a surveillance system. Which brings us into alarms and sensors. Alarms and sensors do pretty much the same thing. They can be open circuit or closed circuit, which means they could be within the network or maybe they're by themselves. We need to make sure that we know the different types. We can do motion detection. They can be infrared or they can be radar. They can be noise detection or proximity readers. They could also be, they could also be like a fiber system like you see here that goes within a fence or a wall. There's a whole bunch of different ways of detecting. It doesn't have to just be from cameras. It could be IR or infrared. And honestly, in data centers, we use door access control, cameras, and infrared quite often. So of course, the bad guys want to bypass surveillance systems, so they need to find techniques to avoid detection. They need to figure out a way to get around our monitoring systems. And they could be a whole bunch of different ways of doing it. As I said, we could talk about physical evasion or technical. Physical evasion, like on a security camera, could be looking for blind spots. That means, they're looking for coverages where the cameras are not covering. And they normally occur due to poor camera placement because we need to move them in a proper placement. They could tamper with cameras now. There's a lot of new ways of tampering with cameras. You can block them, disable them, move them. You can spray them or tape them or use laser pointers to blind them. And then other ways that you can do that is there's other ways, like if they're a Wi-Fi camera, you can use Wi-Fi blockers. You can use anything that you can get your hands onto. So if you can cut the power or the network cables, you can disable the equipment itself. You can, as I said, exploit wireless networks, and you can use a Wi-Fi jammer or a signal disruptor to make sure you can do this. We can go full Hollywood and we can say hacking into the surveillance systems. So that way they can disable or manipulate recordings. Most of the time when you have these, we're talking about insider threats. We're talking about another security guard or something that already knows where the stuff is and deletes the footage so that they can't get caught. There's other ways too. You can use camouflage or concealment. Unfortunately now, obscuring an identity is pretty easy, especially now with after COVID, everyone's learned to like masks. And now if we can just hide the identity of the person, I don't care if I got caught. They saw me on camera, they can't identify that it was me, right? And so we have to make sure that we're taking good care of everything. But the biggest thing here on this one is like to use backup signals, just because bypassing security surveillance system is something that they're looking for. So we need to make sure that our defense is in depth, which means we need more than one layer. Okay. Other physical security controls that we're going to see is we're going to see access control. We can have these different doors that may only allow, like we like to call them man traps. They're just or Sally port. I just don't like that term. They like to allow one person through at a time, so that way that people can't tailgate or get into the system. And so tailgating is the way of somebody who held the door for you, but you didn't imagine. That's tailgating and bypassing some of the access control. So there are different ways of doing it. We have door locks, right? And between door locks, we have a whole bunch of different types of door locks. We have conventional that uses keys, or electronic. Electronic have so many different ways of doing it now. We have the magnetic lift locking systems. We have latch systems, and some things are their smart cards, sometimes they're codes, sometimes they're a combination. Whole bunch of different ways of doing door access controls there. And the other thing is we always have to keep in mind nowadays of access badge cloning. So whether or not it's with our credit cards, as you see there on the top picture, that's a skimmer off of an ATM, or a bottom one, which is a flipper, which allows you to clone and do a whole bunch of different attacks using different things. You have malicious USB. They like to call it juice jacking. I definitely like to use a USB data blocker whenever I use somebody else's cable, and we can definitely look at some of those. So how do you prevent cloning? Well, we need to make a challenge policy. Don't be afraid to say, I don't recognize that person. Let me make sure that they belong here. Because there are a lot of times where that person just did not belong there, and they're just, they escaped through the system. And so having a challenge policy is definitely worth it. And just making sure that you know that who is here, it belongs where they are. We need to make sure that the reception personnel have visitor logs, signing in and out, have different ways of having visitors. You don't want visitors just to be able to walk into your facility. You want to be able to check them in and out as necessary, and definitely have a two-person integrity control system, which means not only one person vouching for somebody, but there's a second person as well. And then ID badges are always helpful. They have your picture on them, but at the same time, they can be faked. So we have to be cautious and make sure that we're dealing with the right person. A lot of companies will keep your picture on file, so that way they know you are truly you, even if they've never met you. Secure areas themselves, like server rooms or cabinets or vaults, whatever it may be, we need to make sure that these locations are all extra secure, and they all can look a little bit differently, but these are going to have multiple layers of security just to make sure whoever does get into these areas are they belong where they say they are. You gotta need to know what a Faraday cage is. Faraday cage is a way to block EMF, to block cell phone signals, Wi-Fi signals, or for signals to come in and out, and there are ways of doing that. Same with cable distribution. If your cable's just running there, you could probably get into the cable and actually tap into the cable signal. But how do we prevent eavesdropping? Well, we protect the cables and we put it through a protected distribution system. And most of these distribution systems are like lead-lined pipes or a pipe system that you just cannot eavesdrop into. Okay. We gotta make sure that our heating, ventilation, and air conditioning is protected for multiple reasons here. Most of the time, these are the weakest systems in our system because they're old. They were built when the building was built. Maybe they do have a network interface, but they don't even have a username and password. So a lot of times we got to make sure that they're set up right. But the other thing is most systems are now data centers. What if an attacker gets into your heating and cooling and either turns it off, or turns heating up, or turns air conditioning down, or adds a ton of humidity into your data center? Whatever it may be, we need to make sure that we're monitoring this so that way we know that everything is A-OK and that we have the proper equipment in there. Because the moment that somebody gets in there and starts tampering with us, we need to know if it happens. Because it may just be equipment failure, but it could also be an attack. When I worked for YDOT, we had this issue and came in one day, the belt slipped off the HVAC unit and fried, I don't know, about 4 racks of gear, which is not very good. Luckily, we had a co-location and we were still operating, but it took forever to recover that gear due to the fact that they got cooked. There are multiple ways of doing heating and cooling. Just know what a hot and cold aisle is. You can normally the front would be cold and the back would be hot. Basically, we want to pump cold air into the front, let it cool out or heat out the back, pull that hot air out, cool it back down, and start all over again. This allows us to cool the air efficiently and prevents contamination within our system because all the cold air that comes back is going to be filtered air. We need to know differences between fire suppression systems. We need to know about fire safety, and we know our evacuation procedures, our fire exits, fire-resistant building design. Most data centers are very fire retardant. Basically means they're not going to burn because the building itself is designed out of materials that just does not burn. We do still need to have smoke and flame detectors just because while the building doesn't burn, sometimes our equipment can catch fire depending on which piece goes bad, especially power supplies. They love to cause problems. And then just remember that you need a Class C fire extinguisher for electrical. Class C is for electrical. Class C for electrical. You got it? Okay. Now our sprinklers can come in a whole bunch of different ways. Most data centers will have most likely a halon or a clean agent system, but you can have a pre-action or a dry pipe. Dry pipe is normally recommended if you are going to have water in a data center. Basically, this is a sprinkler system that has no water in it, and they only pump water into the system when needed. Pre-action is already loaded. Halon is the chemical that takes oxygen out of the air. These are very dangerous for people because if I push this button, you better get out of the data center because it's going to take all the oxygen out of the air to kill the fire. But what happens with that? Well, I need oxygen to breathe. Okay, I don't know about you, but I need oxygen to breathe. So that's what a halon is. And then you've got the clean agent, which is a powdery substance which sucks to clean up after it's all said and done. And I don't like that one, but it is an option. At least you can breathe through that one, right? As we're going through our physical security, we need to make sure that we have secure data destruction. This is not just with paper. This is with our hard drives. This is with everything that needs to be physical shredding. It could be paper. We can shred hard drives now. We can degauss hard drives. We can do a whole bunch of things. Normally, this is done with a third party. But again, be careful with the third party, because make sure that the third party is going to provide certificates of destruction and that you can prove that the devices were truly destroyed and not just resold. Data sanitation, you can erase your hard drive yourself if you want to. You can use kill disk, for instance. This is an image of one. You can override it with zeros. You can do military sanitation, which is going over it 7 times. And it's normally 7 times of random numbers, not just zeros and ones, just trying to make it impossible for data to be recovered. These overriding softwares are awesome, and they are needed if you have data that you truly want to protect, that you don't want anyone else's to get their hands onto. So, but anyway, that is physical security for the CSEC class. That will get you through at least to this aspect. And what we're going to work on next week, so working on the next one, it looks like we're going to be doing social engineering. We got social engineering and malware coming up, and we'll continue our learning on there. See you next one.